Now, although the job prospects of higher education graduates are generally positive, graduate unemployment appears to follow a rising trend of staggeringly high unemployment rates among the youth. Graduate unemployment has doubled in the past 10 years. Is South Africa seeing a return on investment in higher education, considering the billions of rands that are spent? Well, I took Mfundo's line there. But Mfundo, the number of graduates between 2008 and 2023 has more than doubled in population and size due to improved access to higher education. However, tertiary education has come under scrutiny in the past few years due to graduates lacking skills demanded in the job market. This has raised the question as to whether or not South Africa is reaping the deserved benefits on the hundreds of billions spent on tertiary higher education in Mfundo. This is a very staggering issue, particularly when you look at the amounts of money that are spent on higher education. You look at the demand of South Africans applying to go to universities and what universities can actually accommodate. But when you look at these particular stats, graduates unemployment in South Africa, for instance, the overall SA unemployment statistic is sitting at 32.1%. That is overall Mfundo. But for graduates, it is sitting at 9.8%. So if you've got a degree, an honors degree, a master's degree, or a graduate, you are basically within that bracket of 9.8% of South Africans that are unemployed. But in the past 3-4 years, that has doubled Mfundo. Basically meaning that graduates coming out of universities are not meeting the demand of the job market within the country. Then you look at other tertiary, that is 20.8%. That is other tertiary qualifications. Then you look at a matric. If you've got a matric in South Africa and you're looking for employment and you're unemployed currently, that percent is sitting at 34.1% Mfundo. Then less than matric, that is essentially 37.8%. But what is more scaring is that the ones that are with a matric that are looking for employment, that is above the national average of unemployment within the country. That is sitting at 34.1%. The overall unemployment statistic within the country is sitting at 32.1%. So generally what we're seeing here, the trend is that if you want to increase your chances of being employed, you would need some sort of a qualification to be a graduate. But is the South African labour force reskilling and upskilling at the necessary rate for the skills of the future?
Well, Mfundo, the World Economic Forum currently underway in Davos released its latest report highlighting that the fastest growing and fastest declining jobs by 2030. The report has also revealed that in South Africa, automation and digitalization are rapidly transforming industries, leading to a decrease in demand for traditional roles. Let's look at what the WEF report had to essentially say in our next slide, which speaks of the rate of upskilling and reskilling within the workforce. Mfundo, for instance, if you look at 59% of global workforce will need reskilling and upskilling by 2030. That is in the WEF report. Then you look at 170 million new jobs based on new skills. That is particularly when you look at the artificial intelligence that we're currently at. You know, the President of the United States of America, newly sworn in, Donald Trump, was speaking virtually at the World Economic Forum today in Davos, speaking from the United States of America, spoke of issues essentially of what America has achieved within the 4 days he's been in office as compared to what was achieved by former President Joe Biden within a 4-year period. And that just speaks to his relationship with the South African-born billionaire and entrepreneur that would be Elon Musk, particularly when it comes to artificial intelligence, when he does his work with his various entities such as Tesla and the various other SpaceX and these are various other entities, particularly within the digital space. Then you look at 92 million current jobs to be displaced. 92 million current jobs to be displaced, and that will speak to our next slide when we go to it on postal services and other jobs, particularly within the market. And that brings it basically Mfundo, the fastest growing jobs within the country, within the world at this point in time. You look at digital data specialists, fintech engineers, and machine learning specialists. That is all Mfundo. Those top three is essentially, and let me add the fourth one, software and applications developers. That it all speaks to artificial intelligence. You look at data warehousing specialists. That speaks to artificial intelligence as well. These are some of the fastest growing sectors, particularly within the job market.
And these are essentially new industries, because if we're looking at autonomous and electrical vehicle specialists, you are looking at information security analysts. So mostly this is in the digital space, whether we like it or not. Whether we like it or not, digital space is the future, particularly in the world at large. You look at let me just go to the automotive and electrical vehicle specialists. Yeah. The petrol attendants that are currently there, those are stand to lose their jobs with the electrical vehicles that are currently within the job market. For instance, South Africa, that is a market that where in COP29 in Baku, it was a huge topic by South African industries to say that when you go to the electrical vehicles, what do you do with the formal and informal sectors? What do you do with the informal sector of the bush mechanics in the townships, in the rural areas who are fixing these particular vehicles? What do you do with the petrol attendants who stand to lose their particular jobs at this point in time? Our next slide. But it brings us to the question, Samkelo, of are policymakers in South Africa responding adequately to ensure South Africans are not left behind? Because this speaks of the need to quickly upskill. It speaks to upskilling not only within these particular sectors we're speaking about at this point in time. It also speaks to mining. It also speaks to various sectors. Yeah. Which one would also come to bring about the question that we've been debating within the country for the past 10, 15 years or so. Is South African universities producing graduates that are needed for the job market within the country? And the big answer to that is actually no. When you look at those who are graduates, their numbers have doubled in percentage over the past few years in terms of unemployment. You look at the number of graduates who sit at home without any form of prospects of getting a job. You look at how the debate that has also evolved. People saying that you need to look at the curriculum that is there within universities. Is it responding to South Africa's job market? Is it not? What do you then do? But let's bring in an expert who will speak on these issues. That would be Mr. Pari Lekgotla. A very good evening to you, Mr. Pari Lekgotla.
Evening to you, and evening to listeners.
This is a very broad debate within the country. When you look at the current job markets, the needs of the economy, the fastest growing jobs, basically looking at artificial intelligence, is South Africa's labor market and is South African universities producing what is currently needed by the market?
The answer is no. We are far behind that curve. And therefore, we are going to suffer higher levels of unemployment going forward. But perhaps the big question, of course, is the development of productive forces of the world in tune with the advent of technology? And the advent of technology, artificial intelligence, and all those stuff has long been analyzed to be an environment of abundance. And in that abundance where there is no scarcity, you actually have to be thinking about the social economy, because this automation means that people have very little to do with their own hands and the like, and other industries that actually develop human consciousness are the things that we have to do. Because the ability of the machines to do the work of several thousands and millions of people may suggest that we have a surplus population. And in the context of creating a surplus population, we'll say that this population is not needed. Then what do? You have a moral dilemma. And that moral dilemma is driven by the inconsistency of the maturing capital, which actually unleashes such high development of productive forces that releases the human being to be a lot more conscious, a lot more giving, and it's inconsistent with capitalism. That's what we must focus on, as to how do we deal with the capitalist society when actually the instruments that we have unleash so much power and they lessen scarcity.
What strategic intervention? What strategic policy?
Let me make one point.
Okay.
That information technology has shown that the information technology has enabled data to be non-rival. And in terms of non-rival instruments and non-rival data, the more demand on that pushes the price down. It defies the laws of economics as we knew it. And in many respects, in many respects across, the demand for goods and services pushes the price down because it is enabled by information technology. So that's there for us.
Mr. Lekota, what strategic policy interventions does South Africa need to implement to ensure premium placed or higher education and training is worth the billions of rands that is received as investments within this particular sector? What does the higher education sector and the South African government and the policy makers within Parliament have to do to ensure that we get a return on investment?
Well, I think it is true that we have to really deal with the disciplines that are related to the deployment of information technology in all the work that we do, be it art, be it history, be it economics, be it information technology itself. We have to actually say there are now platforms that drive price of goods and services down. The key question that we have to ask ourselves is who owns that technology? It can't be right that in the world, one person, our own South African, has this size of wealth, the size of the GDP of South Africa. It can't be correct. So we have to ask that question.
Indeed, but Mr. Lekota, we will definitely engage with you with these matters. Due to time constraints, we've got to leave it there for tonight. Well, Mfundo, the issue of skills, the issue of the evolution of the workplace is a top and hot potato at this point in time. For instance, you look at the curricula of children at school at this point in time. You look at grade 1s, grade 2s, they are doing robotics at this point in time, something we never did when we were at grade 1 and grade 2, which speaks to how South Africa is gradually trying to catch up with the rest of the world, particularly when it comes to this era of artificial intelligence. Just what comes to mind is when you think of the port of Peru that was built by the Chinese within South America. That particular port is designed to be automated. There is less human capital working on that port, unlike the port in Durban, in Richards Bay, in PE, and also in East London, and and other ports within the African continent and world at large. So artificial intelligence is not only within the specific sectors of intelligence and other areas. It is due to hard labor for workplaces that we had accustomed to at this point in time. Those jobs are part of those that are on the line, just like petrol attendants. When you buy an electric vehicle tomorrow, you'll just plug in your charger at home in your garage, your car will be charged, there will be charging points along the freeway, and those petrol attendants will have to be reskilled.
No, it's honestly a serious dilemma, but we cannot stop the technological advancement right now, but it is a serious concern when you look at how far back or behind we are. If you look at the mining sector, that if there's going to be automation, mechanization, because there are now mines that are simply underground, you just have machines there underground. So it most certainly is quite a serious talking point, and perhaps there needs to be a lot of conversations around how fast we get South Africa there and upskill or reskill most of this human capital we speak of.
It's going to be very difficult. One that comes to mind, Gwede Mantashe is perceived as the fossil fuel dinosaur.
Yes.
His reliance and his non-negotiables when it comes to coal within Mpumalanga, that particular sector, those workers, you look at a power station in Mpumalanga, Komati Power Station, the jobs that were lost there when that particular power station was decommissioned, renewable energy, that is also not that labor intensive and does not require that much of a workforce. That particular sector is also in trouble, and his resistance to that particular change just tells you how difficult it will be for South Africa to move into this particular area. And the labor unions, SAFTU, COSATU, they will fight you tooth and nail for their members, because it would effectively mean that an NUM that used to be the fastest growing union within the world in the late 80s, at this point in time, if this artificial intelligence and this changing workforce were to come into effect, the NUM would probably be left with about 20,000 members. And
Samkele, a very interesting conversation, was certainly worth another specific day for us to talk further on this. Thank you very much for joining us. That is Samkele Maseko on Explain and Verify.